I think the thing about Southern Hills that I never understood the topography, and by restoring the scale of the fairways and opening back the vistas and allowing the scale of the topography to shine, I think that's really what we uncovered as a much better piece of ground than I ever originally thought.
The 18-hole course at Southern Hills Country Club was designed by Perry Maxwell during the Great Depression. Since then, it has hosted 7 major championships, and this year, it'll host number 8, the 2022 PGA Championship. The last time we saw a major championship golf at Southern Hills was 2007. The course had narrow tree-lined fairways and saucer-shaped bunkers with bright white sand. Today, Southern Hills looks very different. That's mainly due to the work of Gil Hanse, Jim Wagner, and their caveman construction crew. The Hanse team made a variety of updates for modern tournament play, lengthening holes and repositioning hazards, but for the most part, they focused on restoring Perry Maxwell's original design.
When we're talking about original, you're talking about similar playing corridors, removing trees, expanding fairways, allowing the slope and the contour of the ground to actually feed balls in different areas and have to be more thoughtful. I think a re-emphasis on the little creeks that run through Southern Hills has been an important part of the restoration that we did there. I think from that standpoint, you're going to see, especially on holes like 10, creeks are going to come much more in play. 18, with the fairway being restored to come back down, the creek going all the way across the fairway as it originally did. So I think opening and restoring a lot of those features will provide a more interesting test off of the tee.
What about Southern Hills makes it such a stern test of a golfer's ability?
I think ultimately it's going to come down to the greens. I mean, those small targets and in the restoration of the green complexes, we found there was a lot of buildup on the edges. So the old bunkers had, the sand buildup had occurred, and then through construction methodologies, they had converted them to USGA greens a while ago. There was a lot of sort of shelf kind of building along the edge of them, and so we pulled all of that back away based on all the old photographs that we had seen. And so I think now you have to be incredibly respectful of the edges of the greens because balls are just going to run away. So I think it's ultimately going to come down to the greens, and hopefully the weather cooperates and we get them pretty firm because the targets are tiny to access or get close to hole locations.
In addition to lowering the edges of the greens so that balls tended to repel out rather than collect in, Hanse and Wagner did away with the rough that used to surround the greens at Southern Hills and replaced it with shortgrass.
I mean, the thing that we love about shortgrass, and I think all of us included, is it opens up an entire range of possibilities versus, and it could even be in that mental shot. Okay, I know that if I miss it 5 feet left of my target, that ball's going 30 yards down as opposed to rolling off the green and hanging up in the rough. Versus it rolls down that hill or it rolls anywhere on any of the greens, and now you've got all these different options of how to play it. So I think it gets not only in your head for the approach shot, but then the recovery shots are so much more interesting. The thing that makes tour players and the top amateurs so good is they work their whole lives to ultimately, and I've said this before, have a predictable outcome. Right, they want to know that, okay, if I swing and I do this over and over and over, the outcome is going to be predictable. I know when I need to hit it 171, it's this. If I need to hit it 165, it's this. The short grass doesn't give them a predictable outcome. And so that can start to get into players' heads as well, which I think really is much more interesting than the traditional just, okay, chop it out of the rough.
What are a couple of holes that you think embody what Southern Hills offers?
Well, I think, you're probably going to look at hole like 18 is, it's a tough test. I mean, it's a killer finish. But the hole that I'm always intrigued by is 10. I think 10 is just going to be such a cool hole to watch. That's probably where I would camp out and watch. It's just, obviously a short par 4. What do they do off the tee? Do they try and push it down to get the better angle in, which is way down to the left because of the slope of the green? If they put any spin on a shot into it, and they're going to be hitting short irons into it, if they pull the string on it, it could potentially come off that left side and go, they could be 30 feet below the green. And the green itself is pretty severe. So I think it embodies all of the more thoughtful challenges that I think exist on a lot of shots around Southern Hills.
Number 10 starts a sequence of 3 remarkable golf holes, which together demonstrate Perry Maxwell's genius for making the most of natural landforms.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously they selected the clubhouse site to be up on the hill and then playing off of it. So with the returning 9s, you're elevated tee shot and then down to kind of a very, very strong cross from right to left slope. And then you've got the hill, then the valley with the creek running over it, and then back up onto the ridge. And it's off the ridge, down to the flat, back up to the ridge, and then 11, you're teeing off on top of the ridge as well, playing down to a green that's tucked into the valley, which comes from off property. Beautiful little golf hole, and the restoration of the creek that runs between 11 and green and 12 tee was part of the original design that had been filled in over time. So I think bringing that back in and the way everything kicks and feeds off to the left, again, it's an interesting, I just thought about this now, I don't know whether it's applicable through the entire course, but the ground's going like this and the green slopes go like that. They basically feed and tie into the way the ground is falling. And then 12, just a beautiful sort of big bending hole playing through the valley. So he used the ridges, play off of, down, and then here you're starting low and you're hitting up onto the side slope on 12, and then it just sweeps and feeds its way down, and then the green nestled in the valley. So it's just, they're 3 perfectly natural holes that play around a valley, and then they range from high to low, and then low to high, and they really, I think the variety is terrific.
Take us through the closing stretch at Southern Hills and the kind of action it might produce at the PGA.
Yeah, I think the underrated green on the golf course that nobody really talks about is 15. I mean, that green is nightmarish as far as, we flattened some areas on the back to try and create some more hole locations, because I think in the past they pretty much relied on that lower bowl front left. And then you transition into 16, which the members play as a par 5, but they'll play as a long par 4. Great topography, small green to play into for a long 4. So I mean, that's just a kind of hold on and get through that golf hole. And then 17 is your chance really to as a short par 4 to decide how aggressive do you want to be. And so you've got the creek running down the right-hand side, and then we restored, put back in the creek that crosses the hole that had been filled in. So now just lots of different options, ways to play it, drive it, hit it up on the shelf, get yourself a level lie on the left-hand side, or hit it down closer to the creek and risk obviously being in the creek, but also having a little bit of ball below your feet and playing into there. So I think 17 is a really good sort of option hole for those guys to decide how aggressive they want to be. And then 18 is that quintessential difficult Parkland, as Jim Finnegan once described those kinds of holes, the quintessential American championship finishing hole. And I think, again, lots of options that we've put a back tee there, so the guys will really probably gonna have to hit driver to get down close enough. And they've got that kicker slope, which we restored, brought the creek back across, so they're gonna have to be thoughtful about the tee shot. And then, that hole just doesn't let up. Long shot into the green, and then the green itself is really challenging. So I think you've got shortish par 4, but really diabolical green on 15. Long par 4, get through it. 17 is really where I think a lot of the decision making happens, and then 18, you've just really got to play good golf.
The closing stretch at Southern Hills represents the strengths of Perry Maxwell's course as a whole. The subtle and varied use of the newly exposed creeks, the different options for conservative and aggressive play, the challenge of the greens and the surrounding shortgrass, and above all, the land itself and its continual movements, both small and large. At this year's PGA Championship, partly thanks to the Hanse design team's work, all of these virtues will be easy to see, even on a screen.